What up, everyone? Chris here to do prediction for this weekend's big fight, UFC 143, Nick Diaz versus Carlos Condit for the UFC Interim Welterweight Championship. Normally, I break down, at least the main card, if nothing else, the events. This time, nah. Only thing I'm breaking down is the main event because it's the only fight I really care about. To be honest, the undercard, really not all that appealing, but this reminds me of an old boxing pay-per-view. Not old boxing pay-per-view, but how boxing normally structures their pay-per-views where they sell it on the main event alone. The rest of the card just there, filler. That's not necessarily the case here, but in my opinion, I'm buying this fight, or I'm watching this event. I'm not buying, I'm watching this event for the main event alone. And if it only showed that one fight, I'd probably order it, even regardless if there was no undercard at all. So, that said, let's get to it. Nick Diaz versus Carlos Condit. Long road coming. Y'all know the saga. Nick was supposed to fight GSP. Condit was supposed to fight BJ. Nick got pulled out of that fight for missing the press conferences. Nick beats up BJ. GSP gets hurt. Nick calls out GSP. Diaz versus GSP scheduled for February 4th or whatever date this is coming up. GSP gets hurt again, and finally we get Condit versus Diaz, which is the fight I wanted in the first place. Not that I don't want to see Diaz versus GSP or Condit versus GSP, but Diaz, my favorite fighter in the sport, and Condit, one of my 5 favorite other fighters. Stylistically, I think it's probably one of the best fights that could be made in mixed martial arts. I felt the same way about Nate Diaz versus Donald the Cowboy Cerrone, 2 of my other 5 favorite fighters currently in MMA. I guess the only downside is one of them has to lose, but hey, those are the breaks, right? At least I'm guaranteed to get a crazy fight, much like we did with Cowboy Cerrone versus Nate Diaz. As for this fight, Nick's coming off the win, as mentioned, over BJ Penn, where he pretty much beat BJ down. Although, it ain't like Nick didn't take some damage himself. Look at his eyes after that fight. But Nick put it on BJ. As for Condit, coming off that first round stoppage over Dong Hyun Kim, hit him with that jumping flying knee, finished him off with strikes on the ground. Impressive win, especially the fact that up to that point, Kim was undefeated in his UFC tenure. As for this one, great that it's an interim title fight because not only is the winner guaranteed a shot at GSP, but it makes it a 5-round fight. Much more compelling than a 3-round fight, especially with these 2 guys in it. I think that favors Nick Diaz, though. Although Condit has never really showed a lot of... He's been in 5-round fights before in the WEC, and it hasn't really affected him negatively, but Diaz is a guy that just never seems to get tired and seems to get stronger as the fight goes on, so 5 rounds is something that I think would definitely benefit him if the fight goes that far. In a way, I wonder if this fight's going to play out like Nate Diaz versus Donald Cerrone. In that fight, I expected Cowboy to use his better overall stand-up game, particularly his kicks, to exploit Nate's weaknesses with checking leg kicks and keeping him at a distance. That didn't happen, though. Nate kept constant pressure and was all up in Cowboy's grill and never really allowed Cowboy to get the space to get his game off. I'm curious if Nick's going to be able to do that against Carlos. I think obviously Nick is a pressure fighter, a busy fighter, a guy that likes to make his opponents uncomfortable. Will he be able to stay on Condit and keep him going backwards and not give Carlos any chance to get comfortable or, get in any spots where he's able to implement his strategy or what worked best for him, which is, of course, his kickboxing and his Muay Thai, in my opinion. Also curious to see if Condit's going to want to take his fight to the ground. Obviously Diaz has great submissions. Neither of these guys, they can both go on the ground. They can both grapple, but neither of them want to go there normally. However, if Condit decides to take this to the ground, he might look to work some elbows, either on the ground or in the clinch perhaps, because Nate still has a lot of scar tissue, still gets cut up around the eyes, and Condit very well could look for a stoppage via cuts. I hope that doesn't happen, but it's definitely a possibility or something I could see taking place if Condit decides to look for that avenue. However, ideally, I'm hoping for a toe-to-toe slugfest war. The best man wins. And if it ends up going like that, I'm going to favor Nick Diaz. Both guys got hell of a chins. I think Condit got some more power, has more punchy power, more ability to knock guy out with one shot, but I don't think he's going to be able to knock Nick out with one shot, whether it's a kick, a punch, even a knee in the clinch. I mean, maybe, you never know. Knee to the jaw in the clinch, that's going to wreck anyone pretty much for the most part. But Nick has showed a hell of a chin in the past. Nor do I think Nick's going to be able to knock out Carlos Condit with one shot. However, Nick is a great body puncher, and Carlos Condit's got a very long and lean frame. And if Nick's able to go to that body early and often, he may be able to wear Carlos down. As well as, with the pressure, with the overwhelming amount of work rate and punches that he applies to all of his opponents in his fights. Carlos has got to look to work those leg kicks and try to slow Nick down to keep him from being able to, be all up in his grill, so to speak. Donald Cerrone wasn't able to do it against Nick Diaz, but Carlos has to look to do it against Nick because Nick doesn't really check kicks all that well, if at all. And although it doesn't really, hasn't really affected him, and look at the fight against Cyborg, took a lot of leg kicks but never really slowed him down, it could potentially have an effect on him over a 5-round period. That said, we did see on this past week's edition of UFC Primetime that Nick is working with the top, American Muay Thai guy at a welterweight at 170 pounds. So I would imagine that hopefully he is working on defensive or checking leg kicks, or working on things, defensively that Carlos Condit is good at, including the clinch as well. Another thing I took from UFC Primetime, the first 2 episodes at least, is that Nick Diaz is singularly focused on his MMA career and what he's doing in sports time. Carlos, on the other hand, has not a newborn child, but he has a kid, relatively young child, looking to get a new house, with his woman. It just makes me wonder it doesn't make me wonder. I just don't think he is as focused, or can be, for this fight as Nick Diaz. Now, it doesn't mean he's not training as hard, but I don't think he's training as much. And it doesn't mean that he doesn't want to win this fight as much more, but it just doesn't mean that it means to me that Nick has this fight in front of him and nothing else to focus or worry on. That's it, this fight, where Carlos has other things going on outside that are taking some of his, can't even think of the word I'm looking for, but I guess focus would be the word. But also his time, his time spent with his kids. Whereas with Nick, it's just all one thing. Beat Carlos Condit, get to Georges St. Pierre. So I give Nick the advantage there as well. So honestly, I think it's going to be toe-to-toe slugfest. I think early on Carlos might have some success, but I think Nick's going to be able to keep the pace, keep the pressure, make Carlos uncomfortable, keep Carlos going backwards, which will hurt his game plan, work in counter shots, and wear Carlos down over a 5-round period. Over however many rounds it goes or minutes it goes. But I do think he's going to be able to wear Carlos down, particularly to the body. I envision it probably going the distance because both guys are so tough and have been in wars before and, haven't really been stopped on other than cuts for Nick. So I envision it going the distance. But I favor Nick Diaz. I just think he's going to land more, throw more, land more, and maybe not land the bigger punches, but do more damage than Carlos over the 5-round stretch. So I'm going to go with Nick Diaz by unanimous decision in what should be an absolute war if all things go as expected. Definitely got to be much better than anything that was took place this past weekend on UFC on Fox 2. At least the Fox portion of the card. That's for damn sure. Talked about this fight as well as the rest of the card, or the rest of the main card, as well as talked some UFC on Fox 2 post-event on this past weekend's edition of Science Bites Radio Show. If you didn't get a chance to check it out live, you can always check it out on podcast or on demand. Link in the information part of the video, as always, as well as link to my Twitter and Facebook fan page for Science Bites, as well as ScienceBites.com. Probably going to do a post-fight video for this the night of after the fight, as well as a post-fight radio show the afterwards on Saturday night, because I usually do the show on Sunday and Super Bowl Sunday, so I'm not going to do it this Sunday. So that's the tentative plan. Anyways, what are your guys' thoughts on the fight? Are you looking forward to it as much as I am? I would hope so. If not, explain yourselves. How do you see it going down? Who do you favor and why? Who do you want to win? I want Nick to win because I want to see him fight GSP. More so than Condit, even though I want to see Condit fight GSP as well. But I want to see Diaz versus GSP more. So even though you may not think one guy's going to win, or you may pick someone different than who you want to win. So who do you think is going to win? How do you think it's going to go down? Who do you want to win? And, any other thoughts in general in regards to this fight and the card, if you want to leave any thoughts on that. The rest of the card. That's it for now. Like I said, I'll probably be back Saturday night. Drop a video then. Radio show afterwards. That's the plan. But until then, I'm out.